There's the participant list. Great to see all of you here. I see a bunch of people's names here. That's great. My name is Ed Temple. I'm going to be hosting this, and most of you would know Wendy. So I would just really appreciate making sure the chat is here. Yeah, we'll ask a couple things. Tegan's going to put up a poll in a minute, but curious as to just maybe getting you to type some answers into the chat box. And before we do some introductions and get going, what are you most looking forward to post-COVID-19, this crazy life we're in now? A lot of people isolating, we're slowly coming out, but even as we come out, we're not in our regular routines yet. And I'm just curious as to some of you, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to going back to when life goes back to normal, whether it's with a vaccine or something else? If you got some answers there, we'd love to see and hear from you in the chat box. Put some things down there. We'll just do that while we're waiting for others. Traveling. Yeah. You can get in your car and go a little ways, but you can't get in a plane the same way. A couple of people looking for traveling. I know I've talked to many people who had plans to go to Europe this summer or in the fall, and I know those things have changed a fair bit, which is unfortunate for a lot of people, although we have much to be thankful for. Any other things you're looking forward to? I know last night I went for a walk with a friend, and it was funny to be at his place and going out for a walk, but not shaking a hand or giving a hug. I miss those things, those little simple things. 6 feet of distance while we go for a walk and share some space. Yeah, hugging grandkids and friends. I mean, that's got to be so hard to go and see your grandkids and then just tell them to stay back. We'll give you a hug later, not now. Yeah, I miss just the regular handshake. Even when seeing people, I've seen a few people where we just sit on a bench apart from each other for coffee. Tegan's going to put up a poll. We have close to 20 people here. We're expecting a few more, but glad to have all of you here listening in today and hearing a little bit more from Wendy. But Tegan, if you're ready with that poll, it'd be great to just kind of get a little bit of feedback about people coming in. We have a few questions about where you're calling in from, how you're spending COVID-19, and for you, what's been the silver lining? There's always an upside to even a pandemic, and we're curious about some of the things that you've been entertaining and being involved in that's different in your life. So we'll give you a minute to fill that out, and then Tegan will show us and get a little bit of a response for what each of you are spending your time on. I got my answers there. Yeah, restored hope, especially for those losing it. And I know it's for me, it's been an emotional roller coaster. So there's been those ups and those downs. And I know some people have gone through it. Talking to everybody is a very different experience for each person and how they've gone through it. When you feel like most people have completed that, Tegan, if you're able to share that with us, it'd be nice to just see a little bit of feedback on where people are at, where they're calling in from, and how they've been spending this season. Tegan, do you have the results to share with us? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Tegan behind the scenes helping us. So most people are calling in from Calgary, some from British Columbia. That's great to see. Yeah, a lot of people working from home. We got a few essential workers. Thank you for your work and continuing to go out and brave the storm, so to speak, in the last number of months. We have a few different people retired and out of work, unfortunate circumstances. Hopefully that'll be changing with people getting back to work slowly. And then for silver lining for some of you, a bit of even more time with family. Yeah, a lot of experience around that, getting healthier, a few of us. I've been walking a lot more. I don't know about you. Saving some money. That's an interesting thing that's happened with, for those of you like me with expenses with kids, all of a sudden, all those things you can't do anymore. There's opportunities if you're still working. Yeah, 25% of you are increased gratefulness. And then there's a whole variety of other things as well. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing with us. We're really happy to have you here. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of where we're going with this today, this will be, about an hour. We'll do a couple introductions of myself and Wendy. And we have a few questions that Wendy's going to be answering for us. And then we'd love to hear questions from you. And so as Wendy's sharing, whenever a question comes up, feel free to type that into the Q&A box. And so just so you know, for those of you who are not familiar, there's a chat box and there's a Q&A box. And so type them in the Q&A box and we'll do our best to get to all of those questions and then go from there. And then after that time, we should be at the top of the hour. We'll make sure to end by then. And then if you need to stick around or have another question, we'll be here for a few extra minutes as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ed Temple. I am currently the board chair of Cause Canada. I've recently been involved and joined the board. My background actually my career started in international development in China. My wife and I were teaching in a university, doing some community health education in a city called Wuhan, which before COVID-19, many people had not heard of the city of Wuhan, but that was the epicenter of this pandemic. And we actually lived there during SARS. And so SARS came to Canada. Wuhan was not the epicenter, but that city of 9 million people was shut down, much like it has been recently. And it's quite the experience to be in a city that large and have no buses, nobody on the streets. And it was a really surreal experience. So now with COVID-19, it's been interesting to see the video and the footage of Wuhan, knowing that we'd spent our time there about 20 years ago for a couple of years. More recently, I worked with Opportunity International, a microfinance organization representing them here in Alberta with a partnership with Rotary and doing some fundraising. And my background between the start of my career and that was in the pastoral ministry. I was the executive pastor at Foothills Alliance Church, spent a little over 10 years in ministry. And then more recently, I'm an executive coach, leadership development person, and do facilitation. So that's where I've working full time and really happy to be involved with Cause. My relationship with Cause started with Opportunity International, where Opportunity International, when they started in Canada, Cause was the organization that helped us get launched 20 years ago here in Canada. And so we had that shared history. So it's really honored to be able to come and represent Cause and work on behalf of Cause with Wendy and the rest of the board of directors as well. So that's a little bit about me. I am heading off. If you see my picture in behind me, this is not my photo, it's just stock kind of thing, but I'm heading off to Vancouver Island here in a week, where we have a friend who has a beach house that we've been able to rent for a week. And the scene looks like that. It's the water and the mountains, so we can't wait for that. But Wendy, how about we hear a bit more from you? I think most people are here to hear from you. And so I'd love to just hear about something that you'd like to tell us about your work with Cause and your passion related to that. For people who are maybe newer or maybe don't know you as well, you know the list of names there and how well they know you.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate you facilitating this for us today and just being really a part of, we feel really blessed to have you as our chair right now. So I'm really passionate about the work that Cause does. I feel incredibly privileged to work with the diverse team that we do have in the field and with the diverse populations that we have. We just have a really super team in Canada, in Sierra Leone, in Honduras, and Guatemala. And our passion for working really in solidarity with people is very inspirational to me. And I really love seeing the impact that we have because we come alongside people to help them.
And before we get into more Cause stuff and what's happening for us these days, what are you looking forward to for the summer?
I love mountain biking, and I love mountain biking with my kids. We're semi-serious. We like to pretend we're serious mountain bikers. So I'm really looking forward to going out camping and to doing quite a bit of mountain biking with my family this summer.
Right on. Well, I hope you get some good outdoor time and some rest this summer. We're going to jump into a couple of questions that we have for you. And then again, for those of you listening, please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A. You're also welcome to put some comments in the chat box or private. You can message us. Tegan will be watching that. I'll be watching that as well, and look forward to further dialogue with you through that. So maybe to start, Wendy, we're obviously in the middle of a global pandemic. Everybody's affected. So there's nobody on this call right now whose world has not been turned upside down. But they're obviously here because they care about our work and how this has affected us. And we're wondering if you could just give us a little bit of an overview around how has this affected us? And I'll maybe ask you some more specific things after you maybe start just with, in general, how would you like to share with us what's going on for cause?
Sure. So in mid-March, when everything kind of shut down here in Canada, that was a similar case in Guatemala and Honduras. And then a couple of weeks later, it happened in Sierra Leone. And so essentially all of our programs came to a stop. We needed to stop having our staff go into the field. We needed to stop. All the schools were shut down. So we really just had to pause and look at what are we doing right now? How do we either keep doing that or how do we stop it and reorient where we are? So I think we did a very serious stock taking of what our skills were and how we can mobilize, I guess, moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about how we have been able to mobilize and kind of some of the opportunities that have come up because of how we've responded?
Sure. So I just wanted to maybe start by helping people to understand what the situation is in each of the countries. So people have been highly, highly concerned about Sierra Leone, and with good reason. Sierra Leone has an incredibly fragile healthcare system. It's one of the poorest countries in the entire world. And I want to tell everybody Sierra Leone is doing better than every other country where we're working. And that, I think, and no one really knows why, there is some guessing that part of it has to do with the fact that Sierra Leone dealt with Ebola in 2014, 2015, and so the government knew how to deal with this major health crisis, and people, the general population, knew how to deal with it. So they've been able to really mobilize and be effective in essentially shutting down the country, but very quickly shutting down the country so that there's been very few cases. I think there is only, there's been 51 deaths to date and only just over 1,000 cases of COVID in the country. In our area where we're working, there's been 3 people who've even been affected. So, and we're working in one of the largest areas. So that's quite encouraging. The bad news is that Honduras has been very badly affected by COVID. It has a very high rate of infection and a very, very high rate of deaths. They say that, in looking at some of the healthcare issues in Honduras, they have one of the most fragile healthcare systems. So there's just zero capacity to deal with this in any way. There is a lot of violence on a daily basis in Honduras, far before this ever happened. And there's no trust in the government. So people have been very skeptical as to what the government's imposing, any kind of lockdowns or closing down of the country. There's been lots and lots of misinformation by people. And so it's been a big, big crisis in Honduras. And then Guatemala is kind of doing a bit better. The government has been more effective in shutting down the country. And so we don't see the same number of deaths. Like in Honduras, they have about half the population of Guatemala, and they have over 300 deaths. Guatemala has, double the population, has about the same number of deaths. So it's been very varied in the countries. Just in terms of what we've been doing, so it's quite exciting in that we've been able to, because we have all these health staff in the 2 countries that are highest affected, we've been able to really reorient them and have them look at how do they start delivering services in terms of response and prevention. And we've been able to, be in contact with some key funders who have been, able to help us support the idea of us actually going out and connecting with communities. But it really goes back to some of the key work we've done in Guatemala and Honduras over the last 4 years through our maternal health project. And that is, in each of the communities where we've been working, we have built the capacity to have a health committee. And so these health committees have been primarily responsible for maternal health, but because we have been working with these people, we've been having good trust. We built a lot of trust with them, and they know how to mobilize around health. We've been able to go back to them and start contacting them and saying, hey, like, what's your issue? What kind of equipment do you need? Do you guys have the information you need? How do we support you? So really leveraging off that, that capacity that we've built over the last 4 years through the Maternal Health Project to work with the communities. It's been really, really inspirational for us. I think really encouraging for the staff in Guatemala and Honduras to see that impact that they've had already through their work in maternal health.
Thank you. So I'm curious as to, just in relationship to food security, education, and health, knowing that each country is obviously a unique situation, but can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on in each of these countries and what we're involved in?
Sure. So I think probably the biggest, most pressing and urgent issue is food security. Guatemala and Sierra Leone both had very, very high rates of malnutrition already. In Honduras, or sorry, in Guatemala, I think they believe about 70% of all children in the regions where we're working already suffer from malnutrition. And then with the close down of the countries, the lack of mobility, people losing their jobs, the rates of malnutrition are just skyrocketing. People can't access their farms. So there's a lot of discussion about how malnutrition is actually going to probably kill more people in a lot of these countries, in a lot of our countries where we're working, but also in developing countries than COVID will, because it's just such a huge pressing issue right now. With regards to the education and the education and health beyond COVID, we're seeing a lot of families believe, well, in Honduras, it's a really common belief that vaccines are actually causing COVID. So kids are getting infected from getting vaccines. So parents, or from the thermometer, or that thermometer, the little red infrared thermometer, they don't like that. They think that could spread COVID. So parents don't want to take their children to the health nurses or to get their vaccines because they're scared of what it might do. And then they're also not going to visit health services at all. So prenatal care, or we're seeing a huge rise in unassisted deliveries again, which is really, sad, because we've been doing so much work on that, but people are just really scared to go to the health system. And then all of the schools are shut down. So we are going to see, and we haven't quite seen the impact of this yet, but we're going to see a huge increase in really young marriages because parents can't afford to keep their girls home. The kids aren't in school, so they really quickly lose their ties to school. And certainly during Ebola, we were really, really struggling after Ebola, and even in the last couple of years, about getting girls back into school, because so many of them had been married, so many of them had become pregnant during Ebola, that it was just, basically they started their adult life because of Ebola. So I think there's a pretty high likelihood that we're gonna see that again with this pandemic.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I mean, and that's kind of reminds me of just, crisis of a couple months can send people in a different direction. That obviously is a much bigger thing than I think of our experience right now. Those of us who are out of work or have lost income, those are different things, but you don't then typically go on a different trajectory because of that. And what I'm hearing you say about the schooling is, if kids are suddenly out of school for 2 or 3 months, that could just change the whole direction of their life in a way that's very different and catastrophic, that we don't have an understanding of that for sure. Can you talk to us a little bit more about our experience with Ebola in Sierra Leone and some of the ways that we've been able to respond that has been helpful because of what we learned through that last experience?
Yeah, sure. So back in February, when I was very, very skeptical that this would affect us at all, we did reach out to our senior management team in Sierra Leone and say, I don't know we don't know what this will look like. And I'm very much an optimist. But I did say, we don't know what this will look like. Could you kind of design us a plan based on what you learned from Ebola? And so they did. They provided us, like our country director, Joseph, and a few of the team members got together and really provided us with the broad outlines of a really, really good plan. And then what we did is we took it to each of our country directors and we worked it through, and with their program directors, and had a really, really good conversation before COVID really hit us to say, what are we going to do? How is Canada going to respond if this happens to us? And that was a really helpful exercise to undertake, because even with our country directors, you know, they're all in different situations. We have different programs going on. And, you know, this was based on the idea that we would get a lot of funding for it, but you could see even within the programs, the kind of the plan that we sketched out across the organization, there was little bits that we could start mobilizing on almost immediately as soon as the countries did shut down. And so, although I would love to say we were really, really well prepared, I don't think it caught us totally unprepared. We were kind of ready to mobilize. And I think it was, it's been so helpful to have had that experience, that experienced staff in Sierra Leone to advise us and to help us to understand what worked well during Ebola and what didn't work well, and what are some of the things we should be concerned about when we're dealing with COVID. So yeah, I think we learned a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, we have one question from Tom, which I'll get to in a few minutes. Just want to remind people, if you have a question, feel free to type that in anytime, and I'll do my best to get to it. We have some really amazing team members, you know, I mean, both in Canada, but also in the 3 countries that we're working in. I'm just wondering if you could share with us a little bit more, our team members that are in Guatemala, Honduras, and Sierra Leone, like what's happening with them? And then we could talk about our Canadian team. But can you share with us a little bit of an update of what's going on and how we're responding to that for them?
Sure. So I would say, in general, all of our staff are probably working harder than we've ever worked. And I think that it is an energy and a passion. I think all of us really do see the critical need out there right now. And so people are excited to be able to participate and really contribute in meaningful ways. We're all working really, really long hours. Our teams in Guatemala and Honduras, they kind of had to take a bigger pause because we were just starting a new health program. And so we had to kind of lay everybody off and then wait until we secured some more funding to actually mobilize. And as we secured funding, then to be able to start mobilizing. So they took a bit of time off, and we were able to re-employ them and start new contracts with them. And then in Sierra Leone, because our programs are really education-based, what we've been able to do is kind of take what we did during Ebola to respond to Ebola, but in the way of education. And because so much of that funding is private funding, we were just able to really say to different funders, you know, is it okay if we do this? How do we continue to work on those objectives, but in a different way? So in the case of our bursary program, where we're helping girls who are in junior high, senior high, and university to go to school, schools were shut down. So we have quite a few tablets in our Learning Resource Center. So we downloaded Khan Academy onto every single tablet, which is a phenomenal learning program. And we took those to made sure each girl in her remote community was able to have access to a tablet and start studying from that tablet and use that tablet. So just kind of making sure that we continue to utilize the resources that we have to help those girls to continue to move their education forward. And so we've kind of done that with all of our programs in Sierra Leone, just to try and keep things moving forward and to be taking care of the different beneficiaries in whatever way we can.
Right on, that's great to hear. How about with our Canadian team? We've had to make some adjustments. We have the CERB, which many people are familiar with. How have we been able to engage our team and care for them, but then also what are some of the issues and challenges that we're dealing with right now?
So with our Canadian team, I think because we were so unsure of what this would mean for us. We were really, really unclear. And I think everybody felt that way. When it first happened, we were like, this could, might not have any funding. We didn't know. So we did immediately lay off a number of our team members. Some of them we did actually lay off permanently, and some of them we gave them temporary leaves. And then in the last couple of weeks, all the people that we laid off temporarily, we have reemployed. So we've brought them back to work, just because now we're starting to see what's going to happen in the future, and we feel more confident to bring them on, and because we really do need their capacity to be working. We just, you can only run with such a small, we have a small team already, so there wasn't a lot to cut, but I think we just have to be so careful. And I think that's, when you did the poll and people said they're saving money, well, I know, like personally, I'm saving money because I didn't know what was going to happen. So, you just kind of cut because you don't know. So, and we did take that kind of approach and tried to make sure that our services and our beneficiaries were not going to be affected by any kind of funding cut, but that we'd be able to redeploy and really respond in a way that I think that's at some of the heart of cause. So that's where we focused.
Yeah. Yeah, great. And so I want to just shift to Tom's asked a question, and if others have them, feel free to type them in there now and we'll get to them. But here's the question that came in. Thank you, Tom. How have Cause's microfinance initiatives been impacted by COVID-19? And the second part of that is, will we be starting any new programs? So two parts to that question.
Okay. The question of microfinance is a great one. Thank you so much, Tom. So there's been a two-pronged impact there. Because there's such limited mobility, people in some communities who are running like little tiendas or little food shops have been doing great with their businesses as long as they can get their products, because no one in the community can leave the community to get food. So some businesses have been doing really well. The majority of businesses have not been doing very well because they can't go out and sell. And so we've been working to really, we've shifted our program. So a lot of the loans that would come due during this period of time, we've extended their contracts, because we don't want people to feel like they have to repay right now, because they probably don't have the capacity. They are not able to do their business. So we've done things like cut interest, we've extended their loans. We've really, really tried to focus, and I think, this is a big focus for us over the next little while, is we don't want people have to use their loans to feed themselves. So how do we support these families now? Because we want them to be able to start their businesses again when COVID is over. And I think it's really important to help keep people focused on, how do I restart my business? And then Cause has been trying to work to continue to support people to meet their basic needs so that they can actually start their business again. So it's been a bit of the first probably 6 weeks after COVID kind of shut down all the countries, I was on calls with our staff probably 3 or 4 times a week, just really talking about what are we doing with their microfinance? How are we managing? How are we taking care of it? And how are we taking care of our borrowers? Because I think that's a really important thing for us to do right now. And the second part of the question was new programs.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that question's related to new microfinance programs or just programs in general, and if Tom wants to. Yeah,
I think like going forward, just with relation to the microfinance, I think we are really looking to when it's safe for people to restart their businesses, how do we make sure they really restart successfully? So is it about helping them to have a little bit more startup funds to rebuild their stock? Is it about helping them to ensure, between now and when they can start selling again? Is it about helping their families to have food? What are their needs? And so that is a real focus of ours right now. New microfinance programs, unlikely. I think we have such a demand in the places where we are that we want to continue to build that and to support the borrowers we have and take on new borrowers, because microfinance is so much built on reputation, right? And having people understand what is the expectation from that microfinance group. So we're not really that focused on starting new programs, but building what we have.
Yeah, and Tom did clarify it was microfinance he was interested in. So kind of related to that is that we are seeing opportunities. There's opportunities for funding, there's opportunities to respond. And so can you just kind of help us understand what opportunities we are aware of and we're taking advantage of because of this unique season that we're in?
Sure. So when this all started, we really mobilized to reach out to some key funders. So Cause does have relationships with governments. We have relations with international or intergovernmental organizations. And so we made contacts with some of those and just said, we're here, we're ready, do you have funding to respond? And so we have great relationships at the Canadian Embassy in Guatemala. And they said to us on a Friday afternoon, can you send us a concept paper for Monday? So we put together a concept note, and it's kind of built from there. So in Guatemala and Honduras, we've received quite a bit of funding to start implementing programs that are purely about helping the communities to develop their plan for how do they respond to COVID, how do they help educate their communities so that the communities know how to protect themselves, but then also providing those communities with equipment. So if it's a hand washing station, if it's soap, do they need masks? What are the basics they need? And then because we have health programs in both those countries, really coming alongside the Ministry of Health and helping to support them so that they have the resources that they need, because certainly things like PPE, expertise, they're just really lacking. Particularly, we work in really rural areas. So, we want to make sure that the Ministry of Health has the capacity in these rural areas to be doing the education, to be testing people. So we have been able to, we're just really rolling out that program. Like in the last couple of weeks, we've started that. In Sierra Leone, we immediately started to be able to reach out and give hand washing stations. However, we're in the process right now of having, of securing, we've been told we're going to receive some significant funding to work in two districts, Konidugu and Falaba, which is kind of the area where we traditionally work, and to do a very, very large project to help the communities really understand how to protect themselves and understand how to help the community leaders understand how to take care of their community members. And of course, with all of those programs, food security is just such an issue, because like in Sierra Leone, I think it's 70% of people said they could not buy food for 3 days. And yet they're doing lockdowns there where people are forced to stay in their houses for 3 days. So if you talk about something having to isolate for 14, that's impossible. So just working with some of those food security issues is really high on our list of importance.
Yeah, I mean, with that reality, there's such a thin line from crisis, and I'm grateful for a lot of us have buffer, right? So being out of work or having that thing, we have a wider buffer of being able to, and there's so many people that live that don't have that buffer. 3 days away, we're now 3 months into this, such a serious thing. As you look to the future, and kind of one of the things that, I'm grateful for is that we have a lot of opportunities of longer term commitments and funding from different government sources or foundations or other partners, that the immediacy is not the same because we have those longer term partnerships. But I'm wondering, as you kind of look at the challenges that we're going to be having to face over the next 18 months to 2 years, what are some of those big challenges that we need to be aware of? And then on the other side of that, what are the opportunities that there's doors open to us now because of the way we're positioned with the longer term relationships and connections with what we're doing where we are?
Well, that's a good question, Ed. I think my biggest concern probably is for the microfinance borrowers, because for them, in our programs, it is about that microfinance is about economic development. And I know, here in Canada, people's jobs have disappeared. What are the opportunities for them to get a new job? In microfinance, in our programs, if people can't repay their loans, like one of the principles of microfinance is if people don't repay their loans, they can't get a new loan. And so how do we make sure that people can repay their loans? How do we make sure people can restart their businesses? And this is how so many women are feeding their children, and so many families are sending their kids to school. So I think that's probably my biggest concern. We know after Ebola, there was so much money was lost in microfinance. Our portfolio became so tiny because people just could not repay it. And so I think that's probably my biggest concern, and that's why we have done so much work to try and help our borrowers be successful and see them successfully through this period so that they can restart their businesses. And your second part of the question is opportunities for the future. Well, I don't know if CAUSE has definitely done relief work in whatever country we're working. We've always been ready to mobilize and to meet those needs. I think for some of our staff, this is a real, I'm not sure, besides the Sierra Leonean stuff, I'm not sure anybody has ever really dealt with a health crisis like this. And so seeing the capacity of the staff, I think, gives them some confidence. I think it's forcing CAUSE to really look carefully at our crisis management policies, particularly with how do we protect our staff in the field. And I think you also see the leadership in new ways. And so I think that is something that I'm sure all of us will be eager to talk more about in the future, because you see kind of a new leadership in particularly in our country staff in Guatemala, for example. We have amazing leadership, but seeing them mobilize in this new way, I think gives everybody a bit more confidence and does build our capacity to be doing this kind of health work.
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't have any charts to show or anything like that, but just really interested, and I'm sure people are interested as well, is when there's a huge crisis like this, that there's huge issues around funding and resources. And the clients that we work with in the countries where we're working, like I said earlier, have a thinner buffer. They don't have that. The risks are higher and closer. And I'm wondering, can you just share with us, where are we at with our resources and our funding around how we've been impacted around our ability to continue to do our work?
So immediately, like I think most of the people on this call will realize we didn't have our gala. And that was a pretty big impact for us, and we're not going to have our marathon. So those are our two big fundraising events each year. And then we did lose a couple corporate donors. So those have had significant impacts on us. But on the other hand, we have done new funding calls, and people have really stepped up. I think we have a very passionate group of donors, and I'm so grateful for that, and the connection they feel to the work that we're doing, and the impact that they can have with their giving. And then just the fact that we've been able to utilize our experience in health programming and in responding to health crisis, we have been able to secure quite a bit of funding for that direct response. I think long term, I'm not sure we have quite figured out what that financial impact will be over the longer term. In the short term, it hasn't hit us. It hasn't been bad for us, but over the long term, in terms of helping sustain our programs, or helping turn this. When we talk about education, the education needs in Sierra Leone are going to just explode when we are done, and when we have kind of come through COVID. So what does that mean for our programs? How can we meet those needs? How can we respond to the crisis in education that this is causing, or to helping people get the vaccines they need for their kids when they feel more comfortable going to get those. So I think we need to be thinking about that more and planning a bit more long term for that.
Yeah. Thank you. And just want to make sure people have a chance to ask a question if they'd like to. I'll be watching that. I do want to check with you on, like, so if people are looking to respond, how can we be involved in supporting what we're doing right now? Because what I'm hearing from you is that we've had some changes that we've had to make. We've lost some things that, our gala and our fundraising are run. Those are things that have been impacted, but at the same time, we've been able to take advantage of some opportunities, which has been great for you and the team to be able to respond to. I know you've done a lot of work in regards to responding immediately, but for people who are looking to be involved in kind of helping out, what are some of the options that we have available to us?
Sure. One of the things we have done is we're doing a match campaign right now for microfinance. So certainly, if people feel like they're in the position to give, that's one opportunity. I think there's a lot of other opportunities. There's something called that I was reading about the other day, because I've been thinking about this and I've been seeing this phenomenon a lot. They calling it the new humanitarian, and a new humanitarian is someone who really looks at wanting to help internationally. But they may not be in the position to go international, and thinking about, well, what skills do I have and how do I continue to move that work forward? So, we had this one phenomenal volunteer who just phoned us up and she said, I have journalist skills. Can I help somehow? And so she often does writing some of our copy. And I think that is really, really helpful for us. I don't think she really understands how helpful it is for us, but it is very, very helpful. We have another volunteer, or another person who who is a photographer. And at the beginning of COVID, she said to me, I want to start a front porch project where I will take family photos for people, and they can donate to cause instead of paying me for it. And, it's open-ended. Doesn't matter. And, we've seen a huge variety of donations from that. And she loves photography. So it's just one of her passions. So it's filling a nice niche, and it's very, very helpful for us. So I think when people think about getting involved, I think it is really helpful when people just say, hey, I've got this skill. I want to do something with it, and I want to do something to help. And so I don't want people to underestimate how incredible that is when people do step up and do those kinds of things. I think another way is straight out volunteering. So whether it's doing journalism for us, or writing copy for us, or running some sort of straight out volunteering. But of course, we're going into the season. Ed and I have had a lot of conversations about things like board members and committee members, and certainly cause can always use more volunteers in that way. So I think that has a lot of meaning. And then I think the importance of just sharing, right? People here in Canada are going through a really, really difficult time. I don't think it's easy. I think this has been really hard on all of us. I have 2 young children, so I don't have childcare, so I'm doing the work from home. Fortunately, my partner is very supportive, but we're trying to work 2 jobs, have 2 kids, and homeschool. I would say it's been hard on all of us. So I think both encouraging others and realizing that we're all in a difficult spot, I think, is a really important thing that all of us need to do right now, and be very compassionate and patient with each other. But then I also think helping and sharing that Canadians are hurting, but there are some really, really critical needs overseas, and that, let's not forget that. Let's not get so wrapped up. And I think there's a lot of, in the international field, there's a lot of concern that every country is going to get very inward looking now. And I think, I'd like to really ask people to try not to do that, and to really help other people to also understand the importance of us continuing to look outward and see where the real needs are.
Yeah, thank you. And I know I was reminded of, I have a brother that's out of work during this season, and I'm just so thankful for, the support systems that we have in place to help bridge this, and the CERB and some of those resources that we have available. But I appreciate that you mentioned that so many of our clients do not have that support system in place in a crisis like this, and they feel the impact the same way, but their experience is very different than when we live in a country like this, where we're gratefully and thankfully have some of that buffer that can support us through a very difficult time. Thanks, Tegan, for putting in that microfinancing match campaign link. There's a link there that's up to $10,000 we've had a donor step up with. So we're excited about that opportunity. And I appreciate you mentioning there's opportunities on our committees and our board. Specifically, committees are, we have an HR committee, a fundraising committee, a finance and audit committee, and governance. So if you have expertise in any of those areas, we'd love to have you have a conversation with us. And Wendy, if people want to get more involved, if they have an idea, something they want to do, how should they reach out?
Well, they could reach out to our info@cause.ca. Usually email is the easiest.
Sure.
Often Tegan and I are the ones that are saying, hey, look at this. And so, I think it's pretty safe to say that all of our emails get looked at. Sometimes we're slow to respond. I get an enormous amount of emails. But I think just sending us an email and having a conversation with us is a really great first step.
Okay. Yeah. So info@cause.ca. Obviously, if you have Wendy's email, but feel free to reach out and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? We'd love to have a conversation with you. And again, just those volunteer opportunities, sharing the story. There's obviously this campaign in June. So really appreciate your ongoing support and just how you've been partners with us. I know we have a handful of people on this call, and there's many others that would like to be here. We're recording this session to be able to share with people who have missed this that would like to have access to it. And so we really appreciate your ongoing support for what's going on. We don't have any other questions here right now, Wendy, but is there anything else that you'd like to share with us that maybe I haven't asked about that's important?
Well, I guess I think, when we look at the impact of this overseas, I think we need to do our best to not just think about the impact of COVID. And certainly it's really, really scary for, I think, all of us. It's really scary for me to think about these health systems in Honduras or in Sierra Leone or Guatemala having to deal with this. And so certainly our priority is to stop it. But I think the indirect impact of this is going to be really huge. And thinking about the education and thinking about the food security issues. I think it's really important for us to not just think about responding in the immediate crisis, but also how do we start planning for recovery. And I guess that was one of the reasons why I was so passionate about starting to raise funds for microfinance now, is that I think that we need to be thinking about how do we help these countries recover. Ebola set Sierra Leone back more than 10 years economically. And that's a huge impact for a country that is just so far behind already. So how do we start planning for that now? And I guess it's easy to get caught up for, even for me, so easy for me to get caught up on our daily, how do we deal with this immediate crisis? But, how do we plan? How do we help be prepared for when things do start to open up and when things start to get better? Because we want it to get better for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Wendy, for sharing that. Had a couple questions come in. Ross has a great question here around just how is the COVID-19 experience revealed? Has it revealed any things that we need to change or that we don't need to do at all? So are there things that are suddenly like these are no longer relevant, or things that we maybe need to consider changes because of what we've experienced in COVID-19?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's from Ross.
I think as an organization, some of the things like I was mentioning earlier about our crisis management and our risk management, I know the board has been talking to me about it for a long time since I started, but I think getting much more detailed about that. And I think, Cause has been, it's very nice because we are very nimble and we're we're a bit of a passion-driven organization. We're ready to jump in and help wherever we can, but it also does reveal a few of our weaknesses. And how do we make sure that we are doing our due diligence? How do we make sure we're better prepared for the next crisis to come along? So I think as an organization, that is some of the things that I have been ruminating over. I think one of the things that I have been very impressed with, and that I think we should do more of, is building community capacity to respond, and whatever that is. And in the case of MNCH, our maternal health program in Guatemala and Honduras, the effectiveness now of our COVID response in those communities where we have been working to build the community health committees is just, we're expecting it to be so much greater than in other communities, because we already have a group of people who are well trained to lead and to care for their community. And I think doing more of that, doing more and making sure we have community committees who are really responsible, really well trained, so that when something comes up, or when they feel there's a pressing need, they can really advocate for themselves, or they can really mobilize. So I think that's one thing that I have learned, and it has been really made clear to me, that is a really wise investment for us, to really invest in those committees and build their capacity.
Yeah, the words that strike me is just resiliency and capacity. What I picked up on what you're saying is that because then the next time, because as we know, these things happen in the sense of crisis. So how do we help build that capacity that communities, families, the people that we're working with have the capacity to be able to respond to them in a better way? And we kind of have that record. We see that they've been able to respond better because of what they've gone through other circumstances. Thanks for that question, Ross. Tom has a question. I love this question. And it has made me look through the list of people who are here, because I was thinking somebody else would be here, but there's a kind of a question and a recommendation. So it comes with, might it be possible to hear from one of the country's directors on a subsequent Zoom webinar? And the comment is, it's always encouraging to hear from those working on the ground and hear the stories of lives of people being impacted by causes work. And so, I mean, we haven't talked about that, but I'm curious as to your
well, actually, I did talk about it. I have talked about it with some of our staff over the last week or so. So I would love to share, have some of our staff. The unfortunate piece is that most of them don't speak English, and in Sierra Leone, sometimes people have a hard time understanding their accent. And so at this forum right now, in this time, I was a bit hesitant to bring in translators, because I think we're a little bit zoomed out. But we were talking that at the AGM maybe this year, we would love to have someone like Jorge, who has been our country director in Guatemala for 14, 15 years, actually share with us. Because in an AGM, you might have a little bit more opportunity to take some time and have that translation. Sometimes I think, personally, I'm having a little problem. I'm sometimes having problems dealing with Zoom over the last little while. There's a lot of Zooming going on. But I think it would be a really nice forum to have some of our country directors share. It is meaningful when they talk. It's really, really meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, I mean, the great thing is that people are more receptive to this kind of environment for doing things like the AGM or other things. In the past, it's not necessarily the way that people are comfortable with it. And so I think there's definitely opportunities for us to explore around how to engage. And we will look to kind of listen to you for some feedback on this format and doing a town hall like this, and whether or not that's something that people are looking for more of these, because it's not, it's one of the neat things that we can bring people together through this medium without requiring people to travel and all those things. And the other nice thing is, you're right, Tom, that we can connect people in a more in a timely fashion, whatever those updates might be. So we'll have to have more conversation on what that can look like.
And with that also, sometimes we have technology issues too. So Sierra Leone, we don't have very reliable technology, or they don't have reliable internet. So Zoom is not a great forum for transmitting from Sierra Leone. WhatsApp is more appropriate, but usually someone in Central America, we can usually quite often get a Zoom. So
yeah. Right on. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for just sharing with us a little bit of what's going on, giving an update for people to be able to understand better how we're adjusting and what's going on. Thank you for your leadership. I know you said it earlier. It's the workload hasn't gone down. If anything, it's increased, especially with not having all of our people around to help. So I really appreciate your leadership, and please make sure to pass on our regards and our gratefulness to our team. Both international team in the Sierra Leone and Guatemala, Honduras, but also our Canadian team as well. And thank you for all of you who have taken the time to be here today with us, for taking this time out and your ongoing support of Cause. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your partnership, your prayers, your encouragement and support, reaching out to Wendy or others. It really takes a community of people, and we appreciate all that you bring to our community and how you're able to help. If you have any other questions, comments, feel free to reach out anytime. Thank you for your feedback. And after this, if you have other feedback about how we've done this, other things that you'd like to see, we just really would appreciate hearing from you. And Tegan, thank you for just being on the chat box and being able to respond. Anything else, Wendy, that you'd like to say as we close?
No, I want to say thank you. Actually, it's nice to see everybody's names coming up, or people who registered. I really, really appreciate people's interest and the fact that they do care about this work. And I certainly appreciate messages and things from people. I find it really, really encouraging, and I'm just very, very grateful for how people do support Cause in many different ways. So thank you all.
Yeah. And Shaka made a comment, and there might be others that are looking for your contact info. So if Tegan and Wendy, if you wouldn't mind just putting your email address in the chat box, that would be great. If you want to reach out to them directly, I put mine in there if you wanted to reach out to me. And there's also the info. You can always just say info@cause.ca and say, hey, there's a message for Wendy, or there's a message for Tegan or Ed, and we'll make sure to forward that. But Wendy's put her email in there as well. So, well, thank you so much for your time and being here. We really appreciate it. And it's been good to connect with you, Wendy, and hear a little bit more. And I hope you guys have a great night. Be safe, continue to wash your hands, and wear your masks when you're out, and do whatever else you need to do to be healthy and well in this season. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everyone.
Lots of thanks in the chat box if you want to take a look at those. Thanks, guys.